Okay, Noah, do you accept that God is your creator?
Absolutely.
Are you a Christian?
I want to become one, yes.
Okay, are you a Muslim?
No.
Okay, would you please say that Muhammad is not the prophet of God and was a false teacher?
Muhammad is not the prophet of God and was a
Okay,
false
good.
teacher.
Okay, so go ahead. What would you like to say?
I was told I could ask a question.
Go ahead.
I'm basically like completely set on converting to Christianity, except there's one thing where like I'm struggling, which is the Trinity. One of my friends pointed out quote unquote friends pointed out a so-called contradiction in the Trinity, and I was asking, and
What's
if
the
I
contradiction?
okay, so he said to me, the Father is completely identical to the divine essence, and the Son is completely identical to the divine essence.
No, that's not the doctrine of the Trinity.
Sorry?
That's rhetoric that you're getting from Muslims.
Is the Father not identical to the divine essence?
No, sir. Well, first of all, what do we mean by identical? There are different ways of cashing out being identical. Okay, so for example, if I print out a poem on a white piece of paper from a computer, from a printer, I then photocopy that on the same stock of paper. Are the both of them identical?
Yes.
Okay, really? So
Wait,
if
sorry.
something is identical to something else, then it shares every and all attributes and properties. So therefore, they wouldn't be two different things. They would just be one thing. So when you talk about identical, it means that they share some major properties that they share the major properties in unity, but there are certain things that are distinct from each other. So there are different ways of cashing out identicalness.
I see. And so
Okay.
how would you say...
Wait, hold on a second. Suppose two people are. Have you ever seen identical twins?
Yes.
Are they identical in terms of all properties and attributes?
I don't think so, no.
No. Okay, so there are different ways of cashing out being identical. So when we say something is identical to something else, we're not saying that they share any and all properties the same, because then we would have two different things. We would only have one thing. So when we say that one thing is identical to something else, that it is a discrete identity state, it means that they share certain properties in common or in unison. So when we look at two human beings, Bob and Joe, and they're identical twins, they look like each other. So they're sharing certain properties in common in unity, but they do not share all properties and attributes together, because there would only be one person. So whoever told you this garbage about identical with its essence is just playing, philosophy speak with you. So in the doctrine of the Trinity, God has revealed that he is one being, not two, not three. He is one being. But within the unity of his being, there is a threefold state distinction of intellects within the unity of God. And we call those seats of intellect that are distinct from each other persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So what God has revealed is that he is the one and he is the many. His oneness and his manyness are equally ultimate. And because there is internal coherence within God himself, he then creates a world that in part reflects what he is. So what we have various levels of unity and diversity in the world. And because there is unity and diversity in the world that is present, we have coherence and intelligibility. All right? Now, so somebody cannot say that God is illogical because logic is correct thinking about the world. But then God dictates what the world is. So typically when people say the Trinity is illogical, they're using very poor reasoning, theologically and philosophically. So in fact, the notion that God is not a Trinity is not coherently defensible. Because if God is a Unitarian being as opposed to a Trinitarian single being of God, then God cannot be perfect. He cannot possess the attribute quality of love actualized before he creates. God could not be a maximally personal being, because to be maximally personal means to actualize relationality. A Unitarian God cannot actualize the relationality aspect of being a personal being. So that conception of God, right, would be imperfect. Notice I'm not saying it's illogical. I'm saying that God would not be perfect. All right. Now, if you take away one person out of the Trinity and you just have a binary, then you have a problem, because now you have two seats of intellect or persons that are they are not within the context of another person. They're in the context of a void. If you add one more person to the Trinity, you then have the relationship between any two within the context, not of any single person, but in an abstract set. So you see, anything that denies the Trinity, a Unitarian conception of God, a binarity or a quadrinity or more, results in certain incoherencies, and you don't have a perfect God.
I see. But you made a claim that if a God does not have the quality or
They're not in a position
love,
to say,
he's not
listen
perfect.
carefully. I'm going to give you something very simple and profound. No one is in a position to say squat diddly about God unless God reveals about himself. Okay? Now, there are some things that, for example, the Bible doesn't define time. Now, we can build upon what God reveals about himself through certain research projects or thought experiments to clarify what God has revealed about himself. But if somebody is not building on or deriving from what God has revealed about himself, then nobody can say squat diddly about God. And I can prove that by just simply saying, can God be known if God purposes not to be known? And everybody says, well, no. To say that you could know about God or something about God if God purposes not to be known is insane. So when somebody starts to give you a logical analysis of God that is disassociated from or doesn't derive from and build upon what God has revealed about himself, they're blowing smoke.
I see.
All right, thank you for coming. But when you come on stage, you have to bring your A game. You can't behave like a snot-nosed, defiant 15-year-old at the cafeteria table who didn't take their morning Adderall.